Cool beans. Alrighty, Miss Kelly Hensley. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. So, you are a wife, a mama to a 2-year-old, a social worker, natural health educator, doTERRA silver leader. I'm sure there's lots of other things that we could add to that title list as well. But I'm so excited to have a conversation with you about your journey through motherhood, your journey through returning to work after maternity leave, because I don't yet have kids, but I have a lot of women in my life who are going through this transition at the moment. And you, as the grounded mama, are someone who I love looking at on social media and learning from. So I thought you were totally appropriate to have this conversation with.
Oh, thanks, honey. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so excited. So tell me, how did the grounded mama start? I'm so interested in hearing the story.
Mm. Well, I guess after I'd had my son, so he's just turned two a couple of weeks ago. I was on maternity leave and something weird and wonderful happened, and that was these beautiful essential oils from doTERRA just like literally landed in my lap. And it didn't take long at all for them to kind of, I don't know, take over my whole life. I think people who know and love and use these oils, they can either acknowledge that like you become obsessed with them, like they're so beautiful and they're so potent and so powerful. And as a brand new mum, my son was about 2 months old, I think, when I started using them, 6 weeks or 8 weeks old. He had his first little sniffle, and anxious mum, first time mum, had no idea what to do. I needed help and I needed support, and I'm not the go down the pharmaceutical route as a first option typically. And so I kind of reached to my local health food store for some help, save me. And I walked out of there with a diffuser and 2 little bottles of Australian organic homemade essential oils that were, good quality. But they told me to buy some doTERRA and a particular bottle of doTERRA. They didn't have it there. And so, my son got over his cold, and for whatever reason, it just like doTERRA kept flashing to me, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And, so the universe was kind of reminding me of this thing. I didn't know what doTERRA was. I didn't even know what the word meant. And so I just remember one night, late at night, probably while I was breastfeeding, sitting on my phone going, I must buy some of those oils. And I logged on and I didn't really question it. I just logged on and I remember putting a post on Facebook saying, do any of my friends have a doTERRA account? And funnily enough, heaps of my friends wrote up. And I remember thinking, why have they never told me about this? And a really beautiful friend of a friend who wasn't one of these people, her name I just remembered seeing something on her Facebook about them. And so I just typed her name into like the doTERRA page and I signed up. And the rest was history. And I don't know, I think just as the days went on, like being a social worker, like I'm just a helper. Like I have this big sticker on my forehead that says like, if you need fixing, give me a call. And it's something that physically, emotionally and mentally I've been working through for many years, because there's some pros and cons to having that in your genes. And I just remember that first phase of motherhood, like it's effing tough. It's really tough.
Yeah.
And you need support and you need love and you need people to help guide you through that process. And I was so blessed. I had some really beautiful mums that we would text each other like 57 times a day or 507 times a day. And I wanted to share what I'd learned through the process of being a mum, because there was some really important phases, particularly like the day before you have your baby to the birth process and the process that our body as a woman goes through to heal physically, emotionally, mentally, that we just had no idea about. And it kind of just stemmed from them. It was like the oils landed in my life. And so I just kind of was like, well, I want to share this information, and I kind of want to start sharing, like I was just naturally sharing the oils with friends. They had a sniffly nose, or someone would be sick, or, I have a lot of friends and people in my life who maybe have anxiety or depression. And, so I was like, oh my gosh, this bottle of balance, like I'm going to send you one. And it just stemmed from there. Like I started a little blog, like thegroundedmama.com. I went full force. Like I brought a website, and I didn't do a half-assed job. And what's funny is I think I only ever wrote about 2 posts about motherhood. Because the oils then just, I don't know, they just came in. And then, I kind of had a Facebook page, and it just kind of went from there. And I would share things about motherhood. And the funny thing is that I think I partly started a blog because it was easier to talk to people I didn't know than it was to my own friends. And I remember saying to some of my friends, because a lot of my friends were beyond the stage that I was at, so they had kids that were like 5, 10. I remember saying to them, guys, I don't remember you telling me this stuff when you had a baby. Like, how did you go through this and not seek support? But I guess like I wouldn't have had a clue, so you do really need support. And I remember, particularly reaching out to like older women in my life, and they could flash back to that time, even if it was like 20, 30, 50 years ago, being like, oh my gosh, and the same feelings would come up, in the same experiences of their hospital or their birth or their recovery. And so I really quickly just wanted to like normalize, the healing and the internal and the external wounds that we might experience. And there's all these things that we just don't talk about, and I don't know why, because it's normal. It's really normal. So it just, I don't know. And I think I spent about a day coming up with a name. And I remember one of my best friends, who's like this uber yogi, and she's like oozes, like if you want to be a manifester, like you hang around her for a week, because she's just like, her vibrations like way up here. And I remember sending her a message, and her sister's a designer, and her sister designed my logo and my original logo. And I sent her a message and just saying, so balance was an oil that I used a lot of, and it brings you kind of to your center, and it really grounds you. And I think because I was, doing the really early stages of motherhood, I just came up with this grounded mama. And I go through phases where I'm like, is that something I want to stick with? Because sometimes I don't feel like a grounded mama, let me tell you. And I keep waiting in and out, but I keep coming back to it. And I've spoken to people lots of times and about, should I get rid of it? Like, should I just, be like my name, should that be who I am and my brand or whatever? And the feedback has always been, no, we love it, like keep it.
Yeah.
So that's where it came from. And the more I think about it, the more like it is who I am, and it's a message I want to sing praises to, that we can do motherhood and be grounded at the same time. Yeah.
That just brings up so many questions. So that's something that I've been speaking to a lot of friends, a lot of young mums, a lot of new mums. You don't need to be a young mum, but this transition that we go into from, being a single woman, getting married, being in a partnership, getting pregnant, and then having your baby. And like you said, like there's so many things that we don't talk about, but it is normal. So what were those first couple months, 4, 6 months of when your son came into the world? Like, what was it like? What are those things that we need to normalize?
Like, there's so much goodness, and there's so much, there's light and shade in everything. And like even now, 2 years later, looking back, like I don't remember I don't necessarily vividly remember those shady parts. One, because I had some really beautiful support, but there's so much goodness in there. Like you have this bundle of joy. And I remember, the day I went to, go for your last appointment and you're not really sure what's going to happen. Like, so I was, overdue. I was pretty much at the point where I was ready to stab someone. Like I was like, this baby's got to get out. Like I'm done. I'm done with the whole experience. I had a pretty good pregnancy, so that was fine. But I knew it was time. Like I knew something intuitively in my body. Like this baby was cooked. He was ready. And I'd been to some acupuncture. Like I'd done all these really beautiful things, and for whatever reason, he just wasn't budging. And it's normal. It's so normal. And it's really funny because now some of my, particularly some of my husband's, friends' wives have recently had babies, and they're like, oh, I'm a few days overdue. And I'm like, babe, suck it up. This is so normal. Like it's so normal for your first baby to be 2 weeks overdue and even longer. And so I went into my midwife appointment. I said to my husband, I'm going to be really forceful. Like I'm going to put my foot down and say, like, induce me. I don't care. The baby's got to go. And I was ready to meet him as well.
Yeah.
And the funny thing was, I walked in there, and the doctor that was meant to be there wasn't there, and I had like a junior bloody Russian lady who I could barely understand a word, but she was so beautiful. And she looked at the computer and she said, I've got some health like things from when I was a young child, but they're on your record, even though I wasn't experiencing them now and haven't for over 10 years. She said, we've got to induce you. We can't let you go any further. How about we do it today? And I was like, I was like, oh, I was ready, but I don't know if I'm that ready. And so that afternoon I met my son. Like, it's just like it all happens this quick. And I had sustained some physical, not an injury, but some physical wounds, I guess, if you like, and no information whatsoever. You just kind of sent home with this, I don't know, this booklet and a blue book, and go and talk to your local community health center, and just no idea how to care for my physical body, no idea how to look after physical things that I had to do. Had no idea that my bowel movements wouldn't be normal for such a long period of time. In fact, 2 years later, they're still not normal. Pain and bleeding and all those things. Like you're so unprepared. They really don't emotionally prepare you for those things. Not that I think you can probably be prepared, but I just think even like talking more and making it more open that's what you would experience. And I was having to take medication for months afterwards because every time I went to the bathroom, I felt like I was having a baby. It was incredibly painful, and that brought up a lot of anxiety because I didn't want to go to the bathroom. And we've all got to poo. Like we've all got to poo. And which is so silly. Like it's so silly, but it's just, I was grateful that I'd met a couple of mums and we did our prenatal class together. And so we all had our baby within a week of each other. And so we were all able to share. Like I wouldn't normally talk with my friends about my poo or my wheeze or my bleeding or, my pain. But we would be sending I wish I'd kept screenshots of some of the messages that we would send at 2-3 o'clock in the night. And that was so important at that point in time. You then start to learn about these leaps, wonder weeks. Like what's a wonder week? What's a leap? I remember thinking, hang on, why didn't anyone tell me about these things? There's this cool app, and we lived by this app. Like, oh my God, what week are we in? Oh, is that why the baby's clingy, crying, and all the things? And it's funny, one of the girls who I went through that experience with, she's recently had a new baby, and I saw her on the weekend, and she said, Kelly, I don't give a stuff about any of that the second time around. Like, because it's such a different experience. And that first time, like, you just have no idea what you're doing. And there's a lot of isolation. There's a lot of anxiety. am I feeding him right? Am I giving him enough? Am I, you know, is my milk strong enough? Is it right? Is he too windy? Is he this? Is he that? Like, you know, am I rocking him right? Should I be rocking him more? Like, there's so much pressure placed on new mums. And, you know, I often say to even, you know, some of my oil customers now, you know, who are young mums or just mums in general, and some of them maybe trying to stop breastfeeding or, going back to work, and like, stop the labels, stop the comparing, stop Googling, holy moly. You know, I remember my girlfriends and I would always be like, oh, I think she's got a sleep association. And I'm like, oh, who cares? Like, they're sleeping, you know? And so, you know, my son's 2 now, and he was a shit sleeper for 11.5 months. For 11.5 months, he woke up 4 to 5 times a night. Yes. Was it awful? Yes. But I just got on with it. I had a lot of support. Like, I was so grateful for the oils in my life at that time and some supplements that I was taking. Like, I don't actually know how I would have functioned without it. But it just is what it is. You just get on with the show and you just kind of do it. And you have days. I very vividly, you know, remember some of my other friends, and you hear a lot of it, like particularly on social media, like these days where you just can't get out of your pajamas. You can't leave the house, like, you know, your hair's a mess and you're a mess. And I have to say, I didn't have too many of those. I had, you know, some days where you didn't leave the couch because you were in a leap, you were in this phase where your child was clingy and crying, because there's a lot of stuff going on up in the brain, and they're growing and developing. And you know, I'm pretty blessed. I'm a social worker. I actually work with children. So I know a lot about child development and the brain. And so it never really fazed me. I was like, gosh, imagine if you were learning like all these new skills. Of course your brain's going to go like, you know, so they're going to cling to the only thing that they know can kind of keep them safe and secure. So I was a bit of a funny mum. I had 2 things that made me feel sane every single day. One of them was a shower.
Yep.
So every single day, without fail, didn't matter if it killed me, I would have a shower. And I would always do it in the morning. So, you know, when my son was super tiny, it was easy because he was either in better sleep, or I'd put him in a bouncer. And as he got a little bit bigger, like he'd be in one of those, you know, bumbo chairs that everyone says going to wreck your kids, like hip development and whatever. I just did what I had to do. And then as he got bigger, he'd hop in a high chair, you know, or whatever. And then as he got to the age where he wanted to be in the shower with me, he'd have a shower with me. The other thing that I did every day was I did my hair. Yeah. It sounds so silly, but it makes such a difference. So every single day I'd get up and I'd have a shower and I'd do my hair. As he got older, that got harder. But in that new phase, it was the one thing that made me feel human. It made me feel sane. I had pretty bad OCD. And I remember a therapist I was working with many years ago for some work stuff saying to me, gosh, Kelly, when you have a child, you know, you're going to have to deal with this. And it's almost gone. It sounds really silly, but like I used to be a person where my husband would close the door and I'd be sitting there like anxious because he closed it the wrong way, or the blinds were the wrong way, like just, you know, pretty bad. Today I put a post up of like washing everywhere, like, you know, I've probably gone the full other spectrum, but you've just got to give yourself to this little person, and the other person that's really important in that process is you. And you can't look after yourself and a little person when you're trying to keep the house clean and you're trying to bake dinner and you're trying to vacuum every day and you're trying to please all these other people. Like, there's 2 people in that situation, and if you're lucky enough, you'll have a partner who can help. You know, so those other things can wait. Like if your clothes are clean, awesome. Who cares if they're in the washing basket? If your dishes are dirty, awesome. It means you've eaten a meal. You know, like we just have to kind of get back to basics, and that's like roof, clothing, and, you know, food in our bodies and over our heads. And, you know, it's a really beautiful and it's a really fun time. It's like, it's tough because you don't know what you're doing, but the one thing that I always say to mums, like, trust yourself.
Yes.
Put the books away,
Mm-hmm.
put Dr. Google away, and talk to other women if you feel like that's something you need a bit of reassurance. But we only need reassurance when we don't trust ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, we see too much in the media of really tragic situations where mums are trusting themselves. And sometimes the professionals around us don't trust us because we're new mums and we're naive and we maybe don't have the experience of a second or third time mum. But you know what? That instinct is real. It's so real. Like, it's primal. It's built in us.
Yes.
And we've just got to tap into it. We've got to, you know, just trust and know and ask ourselves, like, am I really worried right now, or am I being a bit silly?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and trust the response that comes up. Because sometimes you are being a bit of a silly Millie, you know, but sometimes you're not.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when we just have to know, like, where is it coming from up here because we're just being panicked or worried or whatever, but where is it coming from down here or in the gut, you know? And that's when we should take notice of that stuff. And particularly around ourselves, you know, as I say, it can be isolating if you're not blessed enough that you have a circle of people around you, particularly going through the same stage at the same time. You might not have people to communicate with. And so, you know, postnatal depression is so common in women. And in fact, probably 50% of, maybe not 50, probably like 1 in 3 women that were either in my class or my like mother's groupy thing, not mother's group, but you have like a course that you do after you have your baby, and you know, so many of them had either a really difficult birth, experience some challenges. Obviously, if you are predisposed to depression, you're going to have a higher chance of experiencing postnatal depression. You know, it's so common, and like, I can think off the top of my head a handful of my really closest friends who've experienced it. And we just need to take notice of those signs, you know, if we're not coping or we feel like that attachment's really kind of feeling a bit out of balance, you know, we need to be okay with seeking help. And we as women are not good at that sometimes. We're not good at acknowledging that maybe we're not doing as well as we should be, and what's normal and what's not normal, you know, out of fear of so much stuff of not being like my worst fear was being a bad mum. And my worst fear right now is still being a bad mum, you know. I have moments where I lose my shit. I have moments where I just, you know, have to like stop and walk away. And I think, why did you respond like that? You know, he's 2. Like, you know, get your shit together. Like, you're the adult, you know. Why? He's triggering me because he's bringing something up in me, you know. Have I had a bad day? Am I feeling anxious? Am I feeling a bit scattered? Because he's reflecting that straight back in my face, you know. So then you've just got to go for a walk outside, maybe take a few deep breaths, have a cup of tea, whatever it is, or sit down on the floor and play with them, you know, and let them know that, like, mummy's got to get grounded right now. Mummy's got to get back to like what you needed to be, and that's cool and fun, and, you know, not whatever's going on, you know. So we can be really good at articulating that to our partners sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I say to my husband all the time, whoa, have you had a bad day? Don't take it out on me. But then do we do that ourselves? We take stuff out on other people, and particularly our children. And I hear so often from women like, oh, the kids came home from school and like, bang, the whole thing's over. Okay, why? You know, what is it triggering in us? What is it bringing up for us? What's it, you know, because it's not the fact that they've come home, it's something else. It's deeper than that. And I think for me, very much so, when I became a mum, like, your whole world changes. Everything that you've never dealt with up to the surface. Particularly things that have happened to you in your childhood, particularly things maybe in terms of how you were parented as a child, particularly the things that you didn't like. And I know I often catch myself going, I don't want to be this parent, but that's how my parents parented. And so to shift how you were parented is really tough. Like it takes a really conscious, active awareness and constant, you know, practice, because it's really easy to slip into the default position of, you know, being reactive and, you know, raising your voice and those sorts of things. And that's not the kind of parent I want to be. But I don't need to beat myself up over it either. Like it's, you know, I have to just sit there sometimes and go, okay, but I have this awareness and some people don't have the awareness, you know, so I'm one step ahead of, you know, maybe someone else, and that's okay. But, you know, I still judge myself. I still place blame on myself. Like I'm not perfect. I'm certainly not a perfect mum. But we just have to get through each day and lean on each other. And, you know, my girlfriends and I still send a message to each other going, does anyone else feel like killing their kid right now? Maybe adoption? No, gosh, bad, you know, we all have bad days. We all have bad days, but we've just got to laugh about it and get on with the next day and just be so blessed that we even have these days to have, you know.
So much good advice in there. So much. So for a woman who might be feeling quite isolated at the moment, who might not have that support network in place, what would your advice be to her?
We live in such a social world. Get on Facebook. Get on Facebook and search. Like there's all those community groups on Facebook. So just in my little local area, there's a number of like mother parent type groups. New South Wales playgroup, I don't know what it's like in other states, but we have playgroup. Actually, I think playgroups are federal government initiative. It's a really small fee to join per year, like $10 or something. And if you have financial difficulties, they'll actually waive the fee for you. And most areas will have a play group that meets maybe once every couple of weeks or sometimes weekly. And just go. Put yourself out of your comfort zone and meet other mums. I mean, we're really blessed here in New South Wales in terms of our community health. And I think that's fairly statewide. You know, we have local midwives. You can go and talk to your midwife. I haven't been for ages and I keep thinking, gosh, I must go. I miss her. You know, I spent so much of my first year like seeing her every single week. And I'd love to just take, you know, my son for her to be like, holy dolly. But you'd go and each week you'd see the same mums there. You know, they might have been a bit in front of you or a bit behind you in terms of your kid's age, but you'd be like, oh, how's she going? And, you know, like even just that, it might just be 10 minutes a week you get to talk to another human being who's an adult, but it makes a difference. It makes a huge difference. Like here, they ran a mother's group for women. So you would have like a little 6-week course, and at the end they asked you if you wanted to share your phone number, and we turned into a mother's group. But to be honest, ours fizzled out after kind of around that phase where people started going back to work. And yeah, there was some kind of, I don't know, got a bit weird, to be honest. I think women can be a bit judgmental and a bit bitchy, and we had quite a large group, and so it's sort of split into like all these mini groups, and I know I found that really difficult because I wanted to be connected to everyone. And I don't know, when you go back to work, like it's harder because you don't have the time. So when you are at home full time with your babe, like it's such a precious time. And I actually found it like the most social 10 months of my whole entire life, because, you know, particularly once you get past that first, you know, six to 10 weeks, you want to be out, like your baby's immunized if that's the path you choose to go down. So you can get out to play groups, and we would just meet at the local park and we'd have a picnic. Sometimes we'd go to a cafe and have a coffee, and we'd literally just gas bag. We just chat about mostly ourselves, how we were finding motherhood and what was coming up for us. And, you know, like you sit there talking about your child's poos and wees and sleep and all the fun things, but it's just nice to have that shared experience. But Facebook is so good nowadays. And in fact, even in the buy swap sell pages, like locally here, we have a parents or baby buy swap sell. And so you often see mums running in there saying, I've just moved here. these are the ages of my children. Does anyone know of a play group? And like 2,500 people will respond. It's so beautiful. So, you know, we're lucky today they're out there, but you've got to take that first step of being a bit brave to say, I'm new here, or I need some help, or, you know, I'd like to connect with people. Fitness groups as well. There's quite a lot of little fitness, you know, other women that run fitness groups, or maybe a mums and bubs Pilates or a mums and bubs yoga class. That's a beautiful way to meet other mums with little kids as well. So there's, you know, you don't have to go down a play group route if that's not for you, but you know, if you're into that sort of thing, it might be doing a bit of a exercise class or whatever interests you. There's so many things out there, particularly with young babies. You can take them. We have a couple of play centers here as well, and they, you know, that's where parents congregate. So, you know, obviously when your kid's really tiny, you wouldn't want to take them there if they weren't immunized, because the risk of picking up bugs is pretty high. But certainly once they're a little bit older, that's a good place to go. And just, I don't know, you just go and say hi. You know, you just end up kind of standing there while your kid's doing something, or particularly when they're little, you're going to be in there with them. And so you just naturally have to stand there and talk to other mums or dads, you know, which is really beautiful.
Yeah. So community connection to other people who are going through the same experience is really important. You mentioned before too that connecting with yourself and self-care is really important, and distinguishing between when your head is talking and when your heart or your gut is talking. Have you got any tips for women on how to distinguish between that? How do they start creating that awareness if they've never thought about it before?
Yeah. I think, as always, the first step is just being aware that it's something you want to do. And, you know, our intuition is something that can grow and grow and grow and grow. And the first step is just allowing yourself to trust yourself, you know, and to not let that fear and doubt creep in. And a big part of that, I think, particularly when you're first doing that, is to talk to other people, because when you do that, it normalizes that we all have fears and we all have these little thoughts that pop into our head that are so irrational. They're so irrational, you know, and so just self-inquiry, you know, asking yourself questions. It might be whether it's on paper, it might be, I'm a bit of a mental person. So I do a lot of kind of mental work, and I try to do it on paper as well, because it's so much more powerful. But, you know, you might be sitting there late at night questioning things, or sitting there reading up about, I don't know, autism, because you're worried your kid's got autism. Like, it, you know, the things that go through your mind in those, particularly the first 4 months, is just mind blowing. Or you might be worried that they've got meningococcal disease, but they've actually just got a sniffle, or, you know, like, you can get pretty irrational. Talking to others, you know, that's always a biggie for me. But just checking in with yourself, like, where is this coming from? Where is it coming from? Is it coming, am I genuinely scared? Am I genuinely worried that this is something serious? Or is this just more of the irrational fear, like me just freaking out? And quite often it's more of the freaking out stuff, as opposed to the, you know, this is coming from deep within me, deep in my belly. And literally asking yourself the question, you know, closing your eyes for a few seconds and saying, like, Kelly, where's this coming from? Is this coming from your gut? Is this real? You know, or am I just being a bit silly? And normally it will come through. It will come through, no, you're just being a bit silly, you know, or it might be, no, this is real. You should pay attention to this. And when we do that, like, it can be really surprising. It might be writing it out. And for me, sometimes I will write something out. I have no idea what the answer is, none whatsoever. And I might write something out, and I might do something else, and I might, you know, I might be sitting at my desk or whatever, and then all of a sudden it will come to me. It just pops into your head. It might be using the notes in your phone, because I think as a new mum, you spend a lot of time on your phone because you're maybe breastfeeding all the time, so you're buying a lot of stuff, and you're, you know, messaging your girlfriends or whatever. So I use the notes in my phone a lot. I love them. So it might just be jotting down some of those things, and just checking in. Yeah.
So transitioning now into women who might be heading back to work after maternity leave. So it's really important for them to have a support network when they're at home, for them to be connecting with themselves. But what about when they're heading back to work and they're transitioning into that next phase of motherhood?
Yeah. It's a really interesting time, the going back to work. There's so much stuff that comes up for us. There's a lot of guilt. There's a lot of mum guilt, because you don't want to be back at work generally at that point, unless you've been really blessed and you've had, maybe 18 months or 2 years off. I wasn't that blessed. So there's a lot of guilt. Am I going back too soon? Am I going to stuff my kid up? Going to daycare is such a big thing. Like, if you are blessed enough to have family in your life to look after your children, love up on that. And if someone offers to do something, say yes. Just say yes. Accept it lovingly. Thank you so much, Jackie, for offering to come over and clean my floors or cook me dinner or take my son once a week. I'd love you to do that. People don't offer things if they don't mean it. So, just say yes. Become a yes person when people offer things. Give yourself a break. Give yourself a break. We can be so hard on ourselves, and the reality is we have food to buy, bills to pay, and some of us have to go back to work for that reason. Some people might be really blessed that they get to go back to something that they love. The first week to 2 weeks was tough. And I think, like most mums that I've spoken to, they share that experience. It's tough because you're just going through this really emotional time. You don't want to be back at work, but by geez, it's nice to have some adult communication. It's nice to get the neurons firing again. It's nice to feel like a human and a woman. And it's nice to step away from that. Like, you're just meeting someone else's needs. And so your own needs, for such a long time, you do tend to put them to the bottom of the pile. And, we have our own physical and emotional needs and stimulation that we require to function. And so it didn't take me long to enjoy being back at work. I wasn't back at work at full time, and I was really grateful for that. I think I would have probably gone insane, but I went back to work 3 days a week initially, and it was a really nice balance. It was a nice balance. It wasn't too much for my son. So I used to tell myself this all the time: if my child has to go to daycare more than being at home with me, like, it was just something I wasn't prepared to do, because I was like, well, that person's parenting my child more than I am. Obviously, as they get older, it's something that you have to do. And it's, my son now goes 4 days a week to daycare, but he loves going. Like, he gets excited every single morning. My daycare mum's name is Jackie. And from the moment he could say her name, Ducky, we're going to Ducky's. And now he says to me, like, Ducky's, like, because it's fun there. Like, I don't do activities at home and paint and make Play-Doh and all the fun things, and there's other kids there. Like, so that made it a lot easier. So choosing a place to send your child that you feel safe, that you feel comfortable with, that is the kind of place you want to send your child. Like, I went to some daycares and I wouldn't let my dog go there. But don't send your child there, even if you're desperate. It makes going back to work so much harder. Keep searching, because the right place will come. So that just made the transition so much easier. Allowing yourself the space. So when I went back to work, I was really tough on myself. So I forced myself to have a lunch break. I forced myself to not fall into old patterns. I'm a bit of a workaholic. So I knew that there was potential there. But you're a changed person. like you're not the same. So I had a little person to come home to. I had a little person that I was dying to see by like 5 o'clock. And not that our partners or our husbands or our wives are not that important or exciting, but like, boy, it's like a whole nother level. And, you know, so I would be like packed up by 5 to 5. Normally I'd be still there typing away, and like I wouldn't shut off till 5:30 or 6 or 7 or whatever. And so that's a really nice thing. It's a nice thing to not be a workaholic. But just allowing yourself the space, like there's no expectations. And I think as new mums, we go back to work telling ourselves that we have to be the same person. And I remember saying to my boss pretty quickly, I'm not the same person that I was when I went on maternity leave. So if you think I'm going to work the same and work as hard and be as like fast and be as intelligent, like my neurons are not quite firing yet. So, you know, cut me some slack. And I reckon 3 times I had a similar conversation with my boss over a period of, you know, a few months. And, you know, every single time she said to me, Kelly, I don't know what you're worried about. You're still amazing. And in fact, she'd never worked with me before. But she was like, you know, you're performing way above what you need to be. Like, what are you worried about? So there was some fear creeping in. You know, there was some stories going on there that like people are noticing that you're not firing on all cylinders. But that's exactly what I felt like. My brain was not working. And it brought me back to a time when a colleague of mine who was very intelligent, she's a lawyer and she had twins a few years prior. And I remember when she came back to work, she would call me all the time to check things. And I never got it because I never had a child. But I remember going, when I went back to work a couple of months later, I remember emailing her and my other colleague who I used to work with saying, I just want to tell you guys, as mums, you're effing amazing. Like, how do you do it? And one of them wrote back and said, a lot of Post-it notes. And I thought, right, you know, and I went and got myself some Post-it notes because I would just forget everything. Someone would be like, Kelly, can you do this? And I'd be like, oh, yeah, no worries. Gone. Totally gone. So I, you know, I just have this big, like, I went and got coloured Post-it notes, like the listy ones, and I just write everything down. And I did it for the longest time. I honestly feel like my brain is still not quite where it was before in terms of my memory. And so baby brain is real. Don't let yourself believe it's not. It so is. Because we have this other thing in the back there, like you've got to keep someone alive. You know, it's not something you can keep yourself alive. Like we know that if we starve ourselves for a few days, we're still going to be alive. But these little people are a little bit more scary to look after. And so we just have to cut ourselves some slack. I used my oils a lot. They supported me so much when I went back to work. Frankincense is incredible for anything to do with our brain neurology, anything to do with memory and our ability to function. And so I had like a little roller ball of frankincense and I would like keep it on my desk. And I would roll it on every morning, like on my temples or behind my ears. And often through the day, I'd roll it on my hands and just sort of, you know, wipe it like over my body. You can roll it in your hands and just take a few deep breaths. Balance was another really beautiful oil that I used a lot of. I found myself being a little bit more irritated. So things would irritate me more. I didn't have the same capacity to not care about stuff. And so I would have to sniff sometimes my bottle of Balance before I went into a meeting that I knew was probably going to aggravate me. But how powerful is that to know that we have a little tool that we can lean on?
Yes.
And talking to others, again, like the community and the connection is so important, I feel, as a mum. And so I was really blessed that one of these beautiful women who I, you know, had my baby with, she went back to work a little bit before me, actually. So we were able to talk about those things and share with each other what that was like. I was one of those mad mums that went back to work and continued to breastfeed.
Oh, wow.
And I wouldn't say that I regret doing it. I don't know if I'd do it again. It didn't last long. because I felt like I spent my life in my car pumping.
Yeah.
And it didn't feel nice. It didn't feel nice. I was given the key to a room in my building. Like, there wasn't a couch. It was an interview room where we interview not nice people. And I remember sitting on the floor one day with my phone in my hand with the, you know, breast pump attached to my breast, being nervous that like a perpetrator of violence, because I work in child protection, was going to maybe come, you know, it was a locked door, but I just remember sitting, and there's like double-sided glass so we can see out, but people couldn't see in. And I remember just sitting there just thinking, I can't do this. This is not, I'm not producing good milk right now.
Yeah.
And I felt like I wasn't really getting much work done because I was spending like a couple of hours a day pumping milk. And so then I felt like I couldn't eat lunch. Like you know, so I would tell myself these stories that you're not entitled to a lunch break because you've already had 2 hours off work, blah, 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 blah. And so then I resorted to going and sitting in my car in the middle of, you know, a public car park. So I'd have like this scarf thing like wrapped around myself. Again, it wasn't nice. It wasn't nice. And so there's a big message out there to employers to make this process easier for women, because it should be nice. You should be able to go back to work and breastfeed your child or express milk, and for it not to feel dirty. And it wasn't what stopped me, because I would have kept going, but I was at a point, I think, too. So I went back to work when my son was 10 and a half months-ish. And so I continued breastfeeding him at night for quite a long time. You know, we moved to bottles. I remember one long weekend. And so I had a lot of stories around breastfeeding and it being the only thing, because that's what we're told as mums. And I remember one long weekend, I think it was the October long weekend, it must have been, throwing the towel in. It was, you know, I had no milk to send him to school the next day. I'd been trying all weekend to pump and it just wasn't happening. And by that stage, your milk starts to decrease because they're not drinking as much. They're only having 1 or 2 bottles a day. And I remember saying to my husband really late one night while I had tears streaming down my face, I'm done. I'm gonna give in. And, you know, he'd been saying it for months. Just get some formula, get some formula. I was like, no. So, you know, we place so much pressure on ourselves to meet these societal messages that we're told that breast is best. I tell you what, fed is best. If they are fed, they're going to be fine. And, you know, message to mums, look at your friends right now, regardless of what age you are. Do you know which of your friends were breastfed? Do you know which of them were bottle fed? Do you know which of them were premature? Do you know which of them were born vaginally or through a C-section? Do you know which of, you know, your male friends who were circumcised? Generally, we don't know those things unless we ask. So as a new mum, those things are like they're thrown in your face so much. But later on, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You know, we all turn out fine. And so lifting that veil and lifting that pressure that we put on ourselves, I tell you what, that night when I drove to Woolworths, closed. I was determined. I was going to buy organic, like, milk formula. The whole universe was like slapping me in the face. I drove with tears streaming down my face. I remember ringing I don't even know who I rang, but I remember being on the phone to someone. Drove down there with tears streaming down my face, closed. I was like, oh my God. Drove to the next shop, closed. I was like, far out. What am I going to do? And so I was like, we have like an after hours chemist here. I had to buy the worst formula you could ever think of that you had to buy. Like, the universe was just like, Kelly, you need to take a chill pill. You've just got to, you know. And of course, my son didn't care. He was so close to cow's milk, it wasn't funny. He didn't last long on the formula because turns out he's lactose free.
Oh, right.
So so, you know, a couple of days later, we had to go buy other milk. But it was for me at that time, it was the best decision I could have made. It took the pressure off myself. It allowed me to just go to work. And so mentally, I wanted this wall. I wanted to be mum and I wanted to be work Kelly. And I wanted to like separate myself, if that makes sense. So I wanted to be able to go to work and do my job and put on my professional pants and, you know, be the career woman that maybe I used to be. But then I wanted to be able to go home and be the soft, gentle, nurturing mama. But I didn't want those walls to interconnect. And so by going down that pathway and taking, you know, taking that chance to just move to a point where we were nearly at anyway, and just give myself a break, like mentally what it did for me and physically what it did for me was just, you know, amazing. And before long, he chose on his own accord. He was about 13 months when he stopped breastfeeding altogether. He just decided that he wanted the bottle, you know, because he was getting more from it and it was quicker and it was faster. And, you know, I fed him to sleep for the longest time. He was always a fed to sleep baby. You know, I did all the things that the books say don't do. And he just magically one night, you know, started sleeping through on his own. He just magically one night didn't want to be rocked and fed to sleep. You know, he's really independent. He's like me. And so we just rolled with the punches, you know, we just followed his lead, you know, very, very led by him. But that, for me, that's what I needed in that time, was just to cut myself a break, you know, to do, like, to listen in and to tap in. Like, it was actually up here that was saying I had to keep breastfeeding. It was up here that kept saying, because it was like all these things that I was seeing and hearing, but deep down my body was saying to me, like, now is the time, but I just wasn't ready to listen in. And as soon as I did, like, whole body, yes, you know, my whole body was saying this is the right thing. I loved being at work so much more, and then I loved being at time because I didn't resent him. I didn't resent, you know, the time that he was taking away from my, like, adult time. And, you know, we got into a really nice rhythm once we kind of found that place. And, you know, even now to this day, like, I still love being able to go to work and be kind of adult Kelly and work Kelly and, you know, put on that version of my soul, but being able to switch off when I come home. I've never been a switch offerer before, but being able to come home and just solely be with him, you know, because that's my mum time. Yeah.
So
I don't know if that answers the question, but yeah.
Oh, thank you. You have just shared so much knowledge and so much wisdom, and, like, thank you so much for that and sharing your personal stories. I know so many women are going to get so much out of this.
Yay.
You've mentioned balance, you've mentioned frankincense. What are your top 5 oils for mums?
Oh, I bought some Peace. I bought some oil sitting next to me. Peace was another oil that I used a lot of when my son was little, and we still use it today. Actually, we literally roll it on his feet and spine every single night. I couldn't go without lavender. Lavender, funnily enough, it was probably one of the latter oils that I purchased, but changed my life, changed my sleep, changed my monkey mind. I think in the industry I work in, I come home with a lot of thoughts, and you probably do. Like, when you work with people who have got challenges, you do tend to kind of absorb them in your energy. And so, you know, he was kind of 11 and a half months old before he started sleeping through the night. So I was a pretty tired mama. And it wasn't until I fell and even was introduced to the doTERRA lavender that I understood what lavender was, like, all about. And, you know, it's got this incredible power to produce natural serotonin in our brain. So every single night without fail, I've had a few nights where I've forgotten, and let me tell you, they are the reminders of why you do things. And so even while he was still quite tiny and getting up multiple times a night and, you know, hour-long breastfeeds, it was lavender that brought me back to my base, and it was lavender that helped my sleep so much. So for me, lavender, like, helps to turn that monkey mind down, and it helped me to fall asleep quicker, but to sleep deeper. So I found, and it's one of the oils that I say to all mums that I come across, like, do yourself a favor and give it a whirl, because when I didn't use it, the mind would race. I'd be there for hours before I fell asleep. And when I did fall asleep, I was just in that really light sleep phase. And so I would wake up exhausted. So as soon as I started using it, I was falling asleep quicker, which meant I had longer periods of sleep. My mind wasn't racing, but I was sleeping deeper, which meant my body was in that deep for rest phase. So I actually would wake up and just be like, oh my gosh, even though I had little chunks of sleep, it was so much better quality what I was getting. And so just, I love lavender. It's hard to name a top 5.
I know, it's so
something
hard.
uplifting. Yeah, like things like geranium and ylang ylang, whisper, like they're really beautiful oils for women. Actually, if I had a choice, I would say neroli, but I never had it when my son was tiny. That or Claricalm, actually. Claricalm is like a women's monthly blend, which you don't need when you're breastfeeding because you don't have your period back generally, but you may do. But even if you aren't menstruating, it's an incredible oil to support the natural balance of the body and the rhythm and the hormones and the moods. So that and neroli are 2 oils that live in my purse. I'm always putting them on my wrists and my neck and just sniffing them up my nose. But elevation is a really beautiful oil that lives in my car, lives in my purse. It's like the oil, if you're in a bad mood, get it up the nostrils, drip it on your top, drip it on your neck, put it on your wrist, roll your hands through your hair, whatever you need to do, and do it throughout the day. Like it might be, 3 o'clock or it might be 1 o'clock and I'm just feeling a bit blah. It's always my go-to. So like oils for mood support, both from a hormonal perspective, but both from just, feeling joyful and like sleep and calming, balanced lavender and peace are just, and then Frankie for the brain, because we all got to get the neurons firing. They would be mine.
If we had to try and choose 5.
Yeah, we might need a top 25.
Yeah, definitely. Any final thoughts?
Just embrace this journey that is motherhood. Embrace this journey in redefining who you are and your soul journey, and constantly come back to like, who am I now? Because we don't change. It's just that little different things keep coming out, but putting ourselves first, we're not good at it, but it's something we have to do, and it's something that we've just got to keep coming back to. So we'll have to have another chat around how do you rediscover yourself like a year or 2 years down the track, because that's also something that, once people get through that initial phase, and I know I went through that as well, of like, who am I? Because you just feel like this, life force that just, and embrace the power. Being a mum is the most incredible thing. And babies don't have to come out of your tummy to be a mum. So, it might be that you are a foster carer. It might be that you're an adoptive parent. It might be that you take on the care of a really special person in your life. And, it's so beautiful and it's so precious. But just embrace you in who you are in that process and in that experience, and bring yourself to the top of the list. Just bring yourself to the top of the list, even if it's just 5 minutes each day,
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
And get some oils to support you in the process. Because they're just too good.
Absolutely incredible. And they give you that opportunity to check in when you're saying, what do I need, to empower yourself to get that immediate support straight away.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been so lovely to chat. I can't believe we've waited so long to do this.
I know, absolutely ridiculous. But thank you, Kelly, the Grounded Mama. Insta, Facebook, where can people find you?
Yeah, just at the Grounded Mama, 1M, not 2, Mama with MAMA. But yeah, reach out. Totally love to connect with new people. And, you know, both you and I share lots of information and different information, but I share lots of information about, you know, supporting yourself through the highs and lows. And yeah, love up on yourself, and love up on yourself enough to reach out and, you know, see what's out there. Yeah.